What's up, everybody? We're on day 143 of our Bible in a Year series. We are finishing up the book of Esther today. I said a short book, a little detour in between Ezra, or Nehemiah, and Job. So we're finishing that up where we left off. Esther had called in the king and Haman, and they're going to go to this banquet. Meanwhile, Haman got played, not even played, like, go back and watch yesterday's if you don't know what I'm talking about. But essentially, the man that he despises got exactly what Haman wanted. And we're about to see the final conclusion to this. So, chapter 7. The king and Haman came to the feast with Esther the queen. Once again, on the second day, while drinking wine, the king asked Esther, Queen Esther, whatever you ask will be given to you, whatever you seek, even to half the kingdom will be done. Queen Esther answered, If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if the king is pleased, spare my life. This is my request, and spare my people. This is my desire. For my people and I have been sold to destruction, death, and annihilation. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept silent. Indeed, the trouble wouldn't be worth burdening the king. King Ahasuerus spoke up and asked Queen Esther, Who is this, and where is the one who would devise such a scheme? Esther answered, The adversary and enemy is the evil Haman. Haman stood terrified before the king and queen. The king arose in anger and went from where they were drinking wine to the palace garden. Haman remained to beg Queen Esther for his life because he realized the king was planning something terrible for him. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, Would he actually violate the queen while I am in the house? As soon as the statement left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Harbona, one of the king's eunuchs, said, There is a gallows 75 feet tall at Haman's house that he made for Mordecai, who gave the report that saved the king. The king said, Hang him on it. They hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's anger subsided. So, when we talked before about in Esther seeing God's hand in everything, right? You see the two like opposite sides of the same coin. So first, Haman is bringing up all this stuff to the king that he thinks is going to be coming to him. He thinks the king is asking, what can I do for you, Haman? But really the king wants to know what he should do for Mordecai. And so Haman brings up all this like really awesome stuff, and the king's like, okay, go do that for Mordecai. Make sure all of it's done for Mordecai. Then, when Haman plans to end Mordecai, the plans that he had for Mordecai end up being enacted on him. So the plans he has for himself. So from Mordecai's perspective, the plans that his enemy had for himself ends up going to Mordecai, and the plans that his enemy had for Mordecai ends up going to his enemy. Like that is, you may call it poetic justice, but it's God's sovereignty is what it is. Chapter 8. That same day, King Ahasuerus awarded Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Mordecai entered the king's presence because Esther had revealed her relationship to Mordecai. The king removed his signet ring, and he had recovered from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther put him in charge of Haman's estate. Then Esther addressed the king again. She fell at his feet, wept, and begged him to revoke the evil of Haman the Agagite, and his plot he had devised against the Jews. The king extended the golden scepter toward Esther, so she got up and stood before the king. She said, "If it pleases the king, and I have found favor with him, if the matter seems right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let a royal edict be written. Let it revoke the documents the scheming Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, wrote to destroy the Jews who are all in the king's provinces. For how could I bear to see the disaster that would come on my people? How could I bear to see the destruction of my relatives?" King Ahasuerus said to Esther the queen and to Mordecai the Jew, "Look, I have given Haman's estate to Esther, and he was hanged on the gallows because he attacked the Jews. Write in the king's name whatever pleases you concerning the Jews, and seal it with the royal signet ring. A document written in the king's name and sealed with the royal signet ring cannot be revoked. On the 23rd day of the third month, that is the seventh, or the month Sivan, the royal scribes were summoned. Everything was written exactly as Mordecai commanded for the Jews, to the satraps, the governors, and the officials of the 127 provinces from India to Cush. The edict was written for each province in its own script, for each ethnic group in its own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in King Ahasuerus' name and sealed the edicts with the royal signet ring. He sent the documents by mounted couriers who rode fast horses bred in the royal stables. The king's edict gave the Jews in every city the right to assemble and defend themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate every ethnic and provincial army hostile to them, including women and children, and to take their possessions as spoils of war. This would take place on a single day throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month Adar. A copy of the text issued as law throughout every province was distributed to all the peoples, so the Jews could be ready to avenge themselves against their enemies on that day. The couriers rode out in haste on the royal horses at the king's urgent command. The law was also issued in the fortress of Susa. Mordecai went from the king's presence clothed in royal blue and white, with a great gold crown and a purple robe of fine linen. The city of Susa shouted and rejoiced, and the Jews celebrated with gladness, joy, and honor in every province and every city where the king's command and edict reached. Gladness and joy took place among the Jews. There was a celebration and a holiday, and many of the ethnic groups of the land professed themselves to be Jews because fear of the Jews had overcome them. Okay. Chapter 9. And technically there's 10 chapters, but I think chapter 10 is like 3 verses or something, so this is essentially the last chapter. Chapter 9. And the king's command and law went into effect on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month Adar. On the day when the Jews' enemies had hoped to overpower them, just the opposite happened. The Jews overpowered those who hated them in each of the king Ahasuerus' provinces. The Jews assembled in their cities to attack those who intended to harm them. Not a single person could withstand them Not a single person could withstand them. Fear of them fell on every nationality. All the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the royal civil administrators aided the Jews because they feared Mordecai. For Mordecai exercised great power in the palace, and his fame spread throughout the province as he became more and more powerful. The Jews put all their enemies to the sword, killing and destroying them. They did what they pleased, and to those who hated them. In the fortress of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men, including Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Parmashta, Arisai, Aridai, and Vaizatha. They killed these 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. However, they did not seize any plunder. Sorry. Um, on that day, the number of people killed in the fortress of Susa was reported to the king. The king said to Queen Esther, "In the fortress of Susa, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men, including Haman's 10 sons. What have they done in the rest of the royal provinces? Wherever you ask, you will be given. Wherever you ask, will be given to you. Whatever you seek will also be done." Esther answered, "If it pleases the king, may the Jews who are in Susa also have tomorrow to carry out today's law. And may the bodies of Haman's 10 sons be hung on the gallows." The king gave the orders for this to be done, so a law was announced in Susa, and they hung the bodies of Haman's 10 sons. The Jews in Susa assembled again on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed 300 men in Susa, but they did not seize any plunder. The rest of the Jews in the royal provinces assembled, defended themselves, and gained relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of those who hated them, but they did not seize any plunder. They fought on the 13th day of the month of Adar and rested on the 14th, and it became a day of feasting and rejoicing. But the Jews in Susa had assembled on the 13th and 14th day of the month. They rested on the 15th day of the month, and it became a day of feasting and rejoicing. This explains why the rural Jews who live in villages observe the 14th day of the month of Adar as a time of rejoicing and feasting. It is a holiday when they send gifts to one another. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews in all the king Ahasuerus' provinces, both near and far. He ordered them to celebrate the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar every year, because during those days the Jews gained relief from their enemies. That was the month when their sorrow was turned into rejoicing and their mourning into a holiday. They were to be days of feasting, rejoicing, and of sending gifts to one another and to the poor. So the Jews agreed to continue the practice they had begun, as Mordecai had written them to do. For Haman, son of Hammedatha and the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them. He cast the pur, that is, the lot, to crush and destroy them. But when the matter was brought before the king, he commanded by letter that the evil plan Haman had devised against the Jews return on his own head, and that he should be hanged with his sons on the gallows. For this reason, these days are called Purim, from the word pur, because of all the instructions in this letter, as well as what they had witnessed and what had happened to them. The Jews bound themselves, their descendants, and all who joined with them to a commitment that they would not fail to celebrate these 2 days each and every year according to the written instructions and according to the time appointed. These days are remembered and celebrated by every generation, family, province, and city, so that these days of Purim will not lose their significance in Jewish life, and their memory will not fade from their descendants. Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote this second letter with full authority to confirm the letter about Purim. He sent letters with assurance of peace and security to all the Jews who were in the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, in order to confirm these days of Purim at their proper time, just as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had established them, and just as they had committed themselves and their descendants to the practices of fasting and lamentation. So Esther's command confirmed these customs of Purim, which were then written into record. Chapter 10. King Ahasuerus imposed a tax throughout the land, even to the farthest shore. All of his powerful and magnificent accomplishments, and the detailed account of Mordecai's great rank with which the king had honored him, have they not been written in the book of historical events of the kings of Media and Persia? Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Ahasuerus. He was famous among the Jews and highly esteemed by many of his relatives. He continued to pursue prosperity for his people and to speak for the well-being of all his descendants. Okay, that is it for Esther. Tomorrow we'll be getting into Job, which is interesting book. Um, there is an element of the story of Job that a lot of people are aware of, but there's a lot of Job that people aren't. And I think the focus on Job is actually wrong by many people. But we'll get into that tomorrow. Start getting into that tomorrow. Now, we're going to do our questions for today. Question 1. Esther's risky revelation in chapter 7 turns the tide against Haman. How does her courage challenge us to consider the role of faithful action in confronting evil, trusting God's unseen protection? I think it's a shining example of how we should trust God despite what we're going up against, because we, like I've said several times already, we don't know what God has already been doing in the background. We don't know what God has already set up. And for us today, as believers, worst case scenario, like absolute worst case scenario, we die and get to go be with Jesus. That's a, I mean, pretty good worst case scenario. Um, Now I know that can still be scary. That can still be unnerving, And like me, I've got young kids. I don't want to leave yet. As much as I know it would be a benefit to me to not be in this world. Like Paul talks about, the benefit of him staying is for those around him, and not saying that you have this like morbid obsession with death or anything like that, but realizing that, like I said, the worst case scenario, you get to go be with Jesus. That helps a lot, I think, with kind of standing up and making stances like this. Question 2. Haman's execution on his own gallows in chapter 7 reflects divine justice. How might this reversal prompt us to reflect on the certainty of God's judgment against wickedness, foreshadowing Christ's triumph over evil? Well, that is an element, but I think we also see in this is in yesterday's reading. Yesterday's reading, we see the opposite side. I said, there's two sides of the same coin, and for yesterday's reading, it wasn't Haman getting strung up on his own gallows. It was Mordecai given what was what Haman was trying to get for himself, and it rings true of the words that God had given to the Jewish people, even further back in the Old Testament, that their enemies are going to, like, they're going to get stuff from their enemies, right? And the punishment's going to go on their enemies. We see, like, in Exodus, when they were leaving Egypt, they left Egypt with stuff that was not theirs, that was just given to them. That all the stuff was just given to them by the Egyptians, who were just ready for them to be gone and be done. Right? So I'm not saying like every situation God's going to have someone who doesn't like you give you money or stuff, and then bad stuff's going to happen to them. No, because this is different for us today. We're not under the same covenant. Your enemy, quote unquote, God loves as much as he loves you, and he wants them to be a part of the family as much as he wants you to be. That being said, there are people who do things that are evil and wicked against God, and there are people who are trying to do what is God's will, and God can turn around the plans of the evil, or the plans of the wicked, on those who make those plans, and do it in favor and for the benefit of those who are trying to enact his will. Question 3. The institution of Purim in chapters 9 and 10 commemorates deliverance. How does this celebration invite us to wrestle with the importance of remembering God's saving acts in our lives and communities? This is one, I think this is actually still celebrated today by Jewish people, Purim. I might be wrong, but I believe it is. That's, I mean, kind of a cool thing. But also, like, again, this strikes back to what we saw in some of the Old Testament, like, or this is the Old Testament, previous Old Testament with, like in the book of Numbers, some of Exodus and things like that, where there's a big focus on having, like, God set up these festivals and feasts and things like that in order to remember what had been done for them already. That is something I think that we can get away. It's not. I think most Christians, I don't think, would say this out loud, but I think they have this mentality. It's not what have you done for me, which that Jesus died for you on the cross. If he never does another thing for you, that is way more than enough. If he didn't do that, he still deserves praise, worship, honor. But he died for you on the cross so that you can go to heaven to be with him. You don't deserve anything. You don't even deserve that. So, get that out of the way. I think a lot of Christians today have this mindset. It's not what have you done for me, it's what have you done for me recently. They're very short-sighted when it comes to what they have had, what has been given to them, things they have been entrusted with, things they have been delivered from and helped with, situations, things like that. And so I think there's a lot of really bad, like, mindset when it comes to this, and I think this is something that we can do. Have a celebration with your family. If something major happens, you're delivered from something, or some big medical breakthrough happens. You know, you have a I don't know. So you have a family member that has, like, stage 4 cancer, and it looks completely bleak, like nothing's going to work. It's just, you're just waiting for them to pass, and then they go in to get checked again, and just boom, it's gone. Or they take, like, doctor gives them medicine, like, hey, we're gonna try this thing out, see what happens, and it ends up working. Have a holiday every single year. Celebrate the fact that they're healed from that. You had a situation where you were getting ready to, I don't know, like, you're going to lose your house, you're going to lose your vehicle, or something. Like, you can do anything like this, and it doesn't have to be a huge, massive thing. It can be smaller, but have something to remember what God has already done in your life. That makes it easier for you to trust God going forward the next time something happens. You can look at it as, I'm trusting God because he's already proven himself. It's not a blind faith. The Bible doesn't talk about blind faith. That's not what we're instructed to have. We're instructed to have faith based on evidence in previous experience. So take that. I think that could be a blessing to some people. That could help some people, I think, greatly. So appreciate everyone watching and listening at this point. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I enjoy reading comments and interacting with people as much as I can. So I will try to, if I can, interact with people if I see comments on videos, especially if it looks like it can be a fruitful conversation. And that doesn't mean that you have to agree with me. I frequently interact with people that don't agree with me, but enjoy interaction either way. If this has been a blessing to you, you can consider sharing it with somebody else, and it can be a blessing for them. It can help them maybe stick with a daily Bible reading, something they've not done before. It gives them somebody that they can read along with, and make fun of and make jokes of them not pronouncing names correctly and all that fun stuff. So yeah. Tomorrow we will be in the book of Job. Like I said, I think I have a little bit of a different, I think, purpose in what Job is actually trying to explain to us, at least different than what I've heard. And growing up, this could probably just be because, like, the circles that I grew up in. I very, very much think that's likely. But I think there's a lot of people that are in those circles or have been in those circles that are watching some of this stuff. So maybe it'll open your eyes a little bit to that. But it's good. Job's a good book as well. And we're going to have fun going through it. So don't forget to come back for that. Appreciate everyone watching and listening. God bless.